Have you ever been to Brussels? Yes? So you probably know Brussels and its 19 municipalities full of monuments. The Grand Place, the Mannequin Piece, the Atomium, the European Commission. But did you know that Brussels was also full of empty buildings? We're talking about empty offices, empty floors above shops, and even empty social housing units. If we put them all together, we reach a total of 6.5 million of square meters. Well, there are different reasons for these buildings to be empty. Sometimes it's because the owner is bankrupt and therefore cannot pay for renovation. Sometimes he wants to renovate, but just doesn't have the permit to do so. And sometimes it's pure speculation on buildings. Well, anyways, 6.5 million of square meters, it's huge. But it's also a bit hard to grasp, right? So I'll give you an image. It is actually the size of 900 soccer fields. Well, another way to look at it is to say that 6.5 million of square meters, it's actually the surface on the floor of an entire municipality. So I've said it earlier, in Brussels we have 19 municipalities, right? Well, actually it's not true. We have 20. We have a 20th municipality composed only by empty buildings. And this municipality should be called Saint-Vide-Leegbeek, wholly empty, the ghost municipality. Well, it wouldn't be a problem as such to have an empty municipality if we were not facing a real crisis regarding access to space. Let's just look at numbers. We're facing a real housing crisis. Rents are skyrocketing, and the amount of homeless people has just doubled in a couple of years. The waiting time to access social housing unit is just getting longer and longer. Well, it's the same problematic basically for artists, makers, youngsters with a project, local associations. They just cannot afford space anymore. Well, and we can go further, because for the owners of these empty buildings, it's also not a good deal to have an empty place. I mean, they still have to pay for insurance, maintenance, security, and even a tax on empty buildings. So hey, this situation really just doesn't make any sense. So many empty buildings, annoying in one hand, and in the other, so many people just looking for space that cannot afford it. It is time to organize a match between these two needs. And that's exactly what temporary use is about. Basically, temporary use allows this matching between spaces without people and people without spaces. It's a bit like recycling, right? Nowadays, we recycle everything. We recycle empty bottles, we recycle empty material constructions, we even recycle diapers. Then why wouldn't we also recycle empty buildings? Well, let's go back in time. 10 years ago, in 2013. We were a bunch of friends, students in Brussels University, and we had really a hard time to find a place to live. We couldn't rent anything. We had this idea of living together, and we had a bit of this hippie dream of opening our house to the neighborhood, organizing activities, workshop, events, parties. And we were also very naive, like we wanted to have chickens in our garden and collectively share our socks. Well, you can imagine that for an owner at the time, we're not the most bankable crew, right? Nobody wanted to rent his house to us. And then one day, we were talking about the fact that we couldn't find a home. As we were walking in the street, we saw that. Just empty homes everywhere. And then we had this epiphany about temporary use. And we thought, hey, let's propose to an owner of an empty building to temporarily occupy his building, live there for free, and in exchange, he wouldn't have to worry about insurance, maintenance, security, and tax on empty buildings as we would live there. And the day he needs the place, let's say for renovation, we're just leaving the house. Sounds like a great deal, right? Well, this is what we thought. And therefore, we decided to create our project that we named Communa, with the purpose of temporarily occupying empty homes. So first thing first, we created an organization. Then second, we started mapping all around Brussels, scouting empty places with actual paper maps and beers in our backpack. Then once we spot a building, we would call the owner and start negotiating. to have access to his house with a temporary use contract. And after a month of really dedicated work, you know, nights and days, weekends and holidays, then finally nothing happened. And nothing happened because nobody trusted us. Nobody believed in the project. Like the public authorities, they would say, empty buildings in Brussels. No, we don't have such a thing. Of course, we saw all of these empty buildings, so it wasn't true. We would go to private developers, and they would say the same. Oh yeah, temporary use, that would be a great win-win for me. But who are you, actually? Just 20 years old bunch of hippies. You really think I'm going to let you use my building? Even our friends at that point, they started making fun of us, you know. Oh yeah, the Communa guys with their project of temporary use of vacant building. Sure. Hey guys, stop dreaming. Wake up. Grow up. Well, for some reason, we couldn't stop dreaming, and we definitely didn't want to grow up. So we kept on pushing until eventually, almost by coincidence, we met the owner of a property that he just bought and needed to renovate. And the guy was crazy enough to try a contract of temporary use with us. But I just forgot to mention something, actually. It was not just a property. It was a huge building of 8,000 square meters. Just imagine our faces when we discovered the building and we visited the place, you know. Huge office place. I will remember forever when the guy came up during the visit with the key and he said, "You guys are going to have the best time of your life." Well, actually, we moved in the same day and we directly started activities. You know, events, jam sessions, festivals, huge parties. We had a restaurant in the ground floor and a skate park. And as promised, because that's the key element, we had our chickens in the garden. You know, our chickens and us, we really had the best times of our life, as planned. But after about a year, as planned from the beginning, the owner told us that we needed to leave the building, which we did on due date, but not without asking him to sign a letter which stated that Communa was a very professional organization and that every owner with an empty property should definitely try out this program of temporary use. Well, this letter was quite useful because only a couple of weeks later, we moved in another place. It was a very posh villa in a beautiful neighborhood. The community grew, some babies were born, new people joined, we kept on organizing events. And you know, look at that garden. I mean, can you imagine for the chickens, just the best time of their lives as well again? And you know, when you reach this point where you're so happy, you start doing weird stuff. So we just added sheep. I mean, why not? These are nice memories. This was 10 years ago. And in 10 years, just so many things happened. I mean, we've metamorphosed from a collective of 5 friends to a solid non-profit organization with a staff of 45 employees, with 10 active sites, occupying thousands and thousands of square meters all around the city, offering space for about 100 initiatives and a home for more than 300 people, in which mostly refugees and homeless people. So temporary use is really a great way to turn abandoned buildings into vibrant places for the neighborhood, into co-working space for associations and cooperatives, or hubs for food distributions. Cool places for kids, you know, to hang out, playgrounds, but also crazy venues for weird parties. And maybe more importantly, homes for people who need it. Well, so at that point you got it. I believe that temporary use is a great way to provide space. But I think we can go further than that. It's also an amazing tool to rethink the way we plan our cities. This is what architects call tactical urbanism. Well, I'll give you an illustration. These used to be abandoned social houses. We signed a contract of temporary use and transformed them into apartments for homeless ladies. One of the first things they said when they moved in was that they had to walk kilometers and kilometers with heavy laundry bags just to wash their laundry because there were no laundry facility in the area. So we asked around and we found a great partner named Bubble. Well, Bubble is a truck with a washing machine. And they would come once a week, especially for our ladies. But you know, in that neighborhood, people are smart. So when Bubble would come, the whole neighborhood would come to wash their laundry. So we asked the owner if we could let us use temporarily another empty apartment in the area where we could open a temporary laundry facility. He agreed, and we created Plouf. Plouf is with several machines, it's just full all the time. It's such a success, so much so that the owner decided to change his plans for the renovation of the area to include a permanent big laundry facility. And this one will be called Splash. So you got what tactical urbanism is, right? Bubble, Plouf, Splash. Perfect demonstration. Well, temporary use therefore allows us to experiment things on the ground in order to improve the final design. Well, by now you might say, okay, that's an interesting project, but that's a weird thing that can only work in Brussels, you know? Well, it's funny, because when I travel and I tell people what I do for my job, there's always someone who comes and tells me, well, in my city, this would never work. I also thought the same, like I thought we really invented something. But then I ended up meeting people from Paris, Marseille, Naples, Rome, doing exactly the same project. And it kept on going. Madrid, Barcelona, Berlin, even Riga, Jerusalem, Montreal. It seems like everywhere people are using abandoned buildings and transform them. When we met them, we started chatting, exchanging, and you know, they're fun, so we became friends. Then we met all together, and we decided to grow to an international scale altogether. And we created STUN, Social Temporary Use Network, to work on an international scale. It allows us to meet, to grow together, and to occupy more buildings, now all around the world, really. Well, don't get me wrong, right? I also don't want to say that temporary use is all pink and beautiful, because it's not true. We also do a lot of mistakes. I mean, we actually learn by doing, really. We have to face a lot of technical issues. We're working with old, abandoned buildings. We have to deal with bureaucracy. You know, the state doesn't always help. And we have to face a lot of human distress. But hey, overall, I think this is super worth it. We put so much meaning and energy into what we do. We actually transform the city with the people, and by doing so, I think that we challenge the status quo. Sometimes, when the project is really qualitative, and that we reach the end of the temporary use, I look at the building and I really feel like, hey, we're adding value here for the neighborhood. I don't want to leave. We would like to stay. But hey, that's temporary use, right? So it is by definition temporary. There's nothing we can do about it. And maybe it's good like that. Wait, unless actually we manage to be the owners ourselves. If we own the buildings ourselves, we will be able to stay. And this is why we created a real estate company. We actually created a cooperative real estate company with other non-profit organizations and implicated citizens. And we called it Common Ground. Actually, we wanted to name it Common Ground, but then that name was already trademarked and bought by a private company in Luxembourg, and they wanted to sue us and everything. So we did what all great activists do in these moments, you know. We changed the name. We changed the name to Fairground, which is also a good name. And I mean, with Fairground, we're now able to buy out our own buildings. We can go from temporary to long-term. Now the only question is, who says I will not be corrupted, you know? In a couple of years, I will be done with these social projects, maybe, and I will want to sell all these properties, cash out, go live on an island, you know, under the sun, under a palm tree, finally find a community with whom I can share my socks. Well, and to prevent that from happening, we created Fairground as an anti-speculative cooperative, which means basically that when we buy a building, we can never sell it again. It is forever out of the speculative market. Well, 3 years ago, we started with Fairground, and now we own about 20 apartments where 50 people can live. And I believe this is only the very beginning. I mean, 10 years ago, we're just a bunch of dreamers, you know? But with a mix of determination, great teamwork, and a lot of fun, we eventually transformed our crazy ideas into social innovation. And this is working. I mean, these projects are real, to the point that we think sometimes that we should go from social innovation to public policies, to really scale up these models of temporary use and anti-speculative cooperatives. And for that to happen, we have to team up with the public authorities. Only together, citizens, associations, and public authorities, we will be able to recycle our cities and turn them into spaces which are creative and affordable for everyone. Thank you.